su música, cantando el nacimiento de María, y a voz
or if we tear down our institutions, there'll be chaos. Chaos will reign. So what we have now, order and good governance. 6:18 in Trinidad and Tobago. It's been a little over 2 weeks since the Ministry of Education resumed face-to-face learning for upper form students, regardless of their vaccination status. However, online learning remains for lower form and primary school pupils. During the week, more concerns were raised over the rising COVID cases, some of them in the school environment. Well, let's get a perspective. Let's get a context now from the leader of the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association, Ttuta. She is Antonia Tika de Freitas, and she joins us now. Ms. Tika de Freitas, very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Fazir. Good morning to your viewers. Thank you for having me.
What is the perspective from tutors looking at the situation in relation to the school environment and the rising number of COVID-19 cases right now?
Well, Fazir, this should not have been unexpected, of course, given the fact that the ministry insisted that students had to return to school at this time, vaccinated or. We are concerned, however, that each time you have the case or a suspected case, there is a disruption in the operations of the school, which would have particular psychological impact on the students and on the teachers. And you have to find your footing again, so to speak, when you return to the physical space. Ttuta spoke about this earlier on with the Ministry of Education, and we offered certain advice. The advice was not taken, and so we have to bear the brunt of this situation. Now, at present, according to the Ministry of Health, we have roughly 50 confirmed cases, and we have to say it like that, confirmed, in about 8 schools across Trinidad and Tobago, and we anticipate more. What we recognize as well, Fazir, is that the protocols, which are supposed to be the additional layer of protection, are not being adhered to rigidly in many schools. For example, the students would wear their masks upon entry, they would do the hand washing, etc. But by the time they get onto the compound and they start to mingle, you see the masks come off or the masks drop, and they are congregating without the social distancing. In some schools, we do not have automatic thermal scanners, so that you have to still use your handheld device and get very close to the individual to do the testing. We are also deeply concerned, and we've spoken about this with the ministry previously, about the system of sanitization that goes on during the day. Because the reality is the MTS, specific to government secondary schools, they have a particular schedule for doing that. And therefore it's not done because of shortage of manpower. It's not done consistently throughout the day in all of the schools. So these are some of the concerns we mentioned early to the ministry, and we are yet to see corrective measures being taken. Fazir, I want to stress, it's not about being obstructionist or complaining, it's about getting the thing right to protect us and to protect the students and protect their families. And we're not getting it right.
And given that situation, what happens moving forward? Because we are coming towards the end of this academic year, from what we understand, and you can correct me if I'm misrepresenting the situation, from what we understand, come January and the second term of the academic year, from forms 1 to 6, they'll all supposed to be in the school environment, face-to-face learning. So given the situation prevailing right now, what happens next from Ttuta's perspective?
You know, I would want to say, Ttuta, and sound like a broken record, but you hear the same message from other sectors. The business community, the hoteliers in Tobago, come together, let us look at the scenario and develop the plans for dealing with situations A, B, C, D, E, as well as your contingency plans. Have a meaningful discussion and planning so that we know what we are going to do going forward. We have stated that repeatedly, as you are well aware, and it still has not happened. What has to happen next, Fazir, is the willingness on the part of the ministry to sit with all stakeholders and the union and to discuss the plans, not to simply say, well, we had consultation because this group came and we listened to what they said and we've taken notes, goodbye, see you till the next meeting. We have to do better than that. And it has to be that the state and the different entities in the state recognize dialogue with the social partners is the only way to get our things right for our citizens, for our society, and for our students in education.
And I know, Ms. Ttuta, whether you take objection to the word or not, you are seen by many as obstructionists. And I take your point as to why you're making the point that you are not being obstructionist because you are raising a number of relevant issues. But, you know, Ms. Ttuta, I remember I was in Form 4 in St. Mary's when Ttuta first started to get on. Anthony Garcia was the head of Ttuta at the time. And we used to celebrate because we used to go home because Ttuta said whatever the situation was, it was intolerable. And it just seemed, you talk about a broken record, it seems to be just the same things for 40 plus years. In this particular instance, the absence of real meaningful dialogue. So why do you all keep playing the game then?
Because we as education professionals have to make sure that we fulfill our responsibility of quality education, quality public education for all citizens at all levels. You referenced, Mr. Garcia, in the early days, the formation of Comfort, and that would have been when we, after Ttuta would have been formed, etc. But those days when you were looking at situations with salary negotiations and with rights and terms and conditions, unions have fought hard for many workers to enjoy things like sick leave with pay. Unions have fought hard for many workers to enjoy things like having maternity leave and occasional leave with pay, vacation with pay, which we did not have before in many sectors, minimum wages. So it's through the efforts of the union, be it the teachers union or any union, that our workers in different sectors have recognition and have particular rights. When you look at education for you, the only organization that speaks to the welfare of students and is Ttuta. At the end of the day, as a member of an educator union, that's our responsibility too, in addition to terms and conditions for teachers. If we don't get it right, after, as you said, 40 years, when will we get it right and we are looking to recover from the pandemic? God forbid something else happens down the road. We must be resilient, and that comes from dialogue.
But okay, I hear, but it just seems like a game is being played here, where you say one thing, then the ministry will come and say something else, then there will be a meeting, and they will say that there was dialogue, and the tutor would have attended, and then we'll find out when we next week talk to you that there was no real meaningful dialogue, and we could do this in 2 weeks' time, and 2 weeks after that, and 2 weeks after that, and 2 years after that, and 20 years after that, when whoever would have succeeded you or succeeded me in this position, if there still is a show, and nothing would have changed.
Because we have a capitalist mentality for zero, that the unions will know, and this was said to Ttuta, and I'm sure it was said to other unions, Ttuta will be told what it needs to be told. That was the statement. And the reality is, when you take that approach to dealing with matters in education, and the majority of your workers are unionized, then you will have problems. We have said to the Ministry of Education in the past, under different ministers, we've had working situations. Ttuta and the Ministry of Education officials have gone into schools for zero to correct health and safety measures, to look at the remedies and to deal with them, to indicate, well, listen, this is a situation affecting the students in the school. Let's see how we can collaborate. We have done these things at the lower level over the years. Why is it a problem to do it at the higher level where these major decisions are being taken? One has to wonder if it's simply an ideological approach that you're resisting the partnership and you feel you will lose control over the workers, over the scenario when you partner with the union and other stakeholders. One has to wonder, because at the end of the day, when the rest of the Caribbean is moving ahead with the education sector, having worked with and built upon the foundation of the CARICOM recovery program, if Trinidad and Tobago does not partner with the union and with educators, where will we be in that regard? We will be lagging behind, regardless of what. So we have to start the discussion in our country and get it real.
And before we take a break, and we'll come back discussing a few more issues, because there's always a lot to discuss when we talk about education, because it's a vital element of the fabric of any presumably civilized society. Who told you that? That Ttuta will be told what it needs to be told? Who told you all that?
That was said to the association in front of the national officers and the Ministry of Education officials in a meeting.
You can't identify who said it?
But it wasn't you, so that's the important thing.
All right, plain political again, but we will continue our discussion in a moment. Antonia Ttuta de Freitas here with us. No, it's a serious issue because I know many of you might have that perspective. Oh God, here we go again, same thing over and over. But is it being fixed? Is it being attended to? Is it being repaired? Is it being remedied? Do we have to just keep respecting the office? It's now time to remind you of the COVID-19 protocols before we take a break and return to our discussion with Ms. Antonia Ttuta de Freitas. Wear a mask over the nose and mouth when you go out in public. It is the law. Keep your distance from others at least 6 feet or 2 meters. Stay home if you're ill. Wash your hands often with soap and water or use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer. Cough into a tissue into the crook of your elbow. Avoid touching your face. Please sanitize those hard surfaces, tabletops, handrails, doorknobs, trolleys and cell phones as often as possible. We'll be back with our discussion with Ms. Antonia Ttuta de Freitas right after this. .33 in Trinidad and Tobago, which means that we have a few minutes left with the president of the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association, Antonia Ttuta de Freitas, and we have a couple of issues we want to touch on: the situation from the primary school environment and how that is being handled right now. But before we get to that, Ms. Ttuta de Freitas, the issue of all these assessments and that have to be done for various examinations, and what are the challenges being faced in that regard. What would you like to clarify for us on that situation?
One of the things we have to bear in mind is that from March 2020 to now, we are still in what you would call emergency remote teaching mode. We are still trying to battle situations and outfires as we are seeing. We have not transitioned yet to a point where we have a systematic plan for curriculum delivery and for students doing assessments, where we can truly say we have online teaching taking place and online learning. We have not transitioned to that point. So when the students do the CXC's exams and we see that the results are not what we expected and we make a big brouhaha about it, it suggests that, listen, there is that scenario because of a lack of a proper plan for how to deal with it. And the same could very well be applied or utilized when we look at what's happening with the primary school. We are still having primary school students at home, given the nature of the situation, vaccines not available, schools are not ready. Primary schools are not ready to accommodate. Yes, there are principals who may check on the schools ever so often, visit beyond the compound. There are principals who would submit to the Ministry of Education, this repair needs to be done, that item needs to be addressed. However, there is no systematic plan for addressing these, notwithstanding the fact that education sector got the largest chunk of the budgetary allocation for fiscal 21-22. If we do not foresee, look at the different resources required to deal with assessments at primary and the secondary level, to deal with school infrastructure and training as we try to transition from the emergency mode to the real online teaching, the real blended approach, we are going to find ourselves in problems that similar to what we have now. Stop and start, we are running around like headless chickens, we are panicking, and there is no real plan for how we do the scenario. I repeat, there is the willingness on the part of Ttuta and other stakeholders to come together and work on that plan so that the students' assessments will not be jeopardized. CXC, I will say, is not going to give Trinidad and Tobago a blight because we are back and forth at this time with our students in and out of school. That's not going to happen. So right now, our examination students in some sectors are at a serious disadvantage in their preparation for examinations.
You know, Ms. Tika de Freitas, I'm listening to you and I'm wondering, you know, how are parents coping? Especially those who with limited resources, those in different parts of the country where internet access or Wi-Fi is very limited and who have limited resources and so on. Because I'm just struggling to understand. Here we are in the November of 2021 when this thing started in March of 2020. And I'm hearing you talking about things, unless you're lying and misrepresenting the issue. I'm hearing you talking about things that we were told, we were advised, we were informed confidently would be addressed and that we would be dealing, and as I mentioned to the minister at the time, she said in October of last year, 90% of students have access to online education, and she maintained up to the last time I spoke to her that was the data that she had available to her. So really, is there an official reality and a real reality? Forgive me for asking a stupid question.
Quite possibly, Fazil, because the teachers will tell you and parents will tell you. Fazil, I am sure you and citizens across Trinidad and Tobago, on any given morning, depending on location, might see a youngster on the road riding a bike, pushing a trolley with produce to sell, or doing something at a time when you would expect the youngster to be engaged in classes, the online classes, as we are calling it. So the fact that the youngsters outside of the home doing something that's not school related speaks to the fact that, one, either the child does not have the device, the child doesn't have the connectivity, there is the supervision issue with the parents having to go to work to keep the family going, or some other factor. So we are not, as a society, bringing this information together, massaging it and synthesizing it to put real systems in place to help these students. We rely on statistics, 20-something% of students alone still waiting on devices or whatever it is. We rely on statistics. Fazil, these are not statistics. These are thousands of children, thousands of families who are struggling, whose children are disenfranchised, and there are teachers who are trying their best to reach out, parents who are trying their best to keep the thing above water, and our society is not giving them the kind of support that they need. They're not stats, and we have to get to that point where we move away from quoting statistics and looking at children, looking at parents, looking at families. When a parent would say to the teacher, listen, I live in Vestini, do the geography, I live in Vestini, and my child is going to a school in San Fernando, and there is no school transport available to date. So therefore, my child has to take public transport to get to school whenever he or she has to get to school. That is a scary thing for the parent. So what does the parent do? The parent makes a call and says, listen, you see me? I am not sending my child today, because the minute the child gives a sniffle, the parent gets worried and keeps the child home. And on the other hand, there are parents who are sending children to school ill because they're concerned that the children have to catch up because they've not heard of any other plan for helping the youngsters cope. And these are the realities. There are parents who still, even though their children are in 4, 5, or 6, who still have not sent the children out because they simply can't afford to buy the uniforms and pay the transport for the children to go to school. And these things are not being talked about. What forum have we had for parents to say to the Ministry of Education, listen, these are the realities, Madam Minister. These are the realities, ministers. We need help with A, B, C, D, E. And therefore, we can say, okay, Ministry of Social Development, Ministry of whatever, we are going to help. We have not had that kind of interaction and dialogue. And the governance of the ministry by PR is something that continues.
So, but does Ttuta take advantage of whatever opportunity that you might have for dialogue, or are you only interested
definitely.
Because the argument could be put forward that you're only interested in terms and conditions.
We have partnership with various parents groups. So they have, for example, one group has a forum on a Sunday evening where you would have teachers, you would have parents, and Ttuta interacts with parents at that level. We have the situations in schools where the teachers on the compound, the staff rep of Ttuta, etc., would interact with the parents. So we try to bring the information, we try to bridge the gap. But when we get the information, we are not in a position as Ttuta to synthesize and to render the assistance necessary.
I hear you on that. Maybe if you would allow me, let me just jump, if I could jump in here, because maybe you misinterpreted my question. What I was asking is that when you all are actually across the table from the Ministry of Education, you don't get frustrated and say, look, what world are you in?
We sigh, we bite our tongues, and we put it very nicely. We keep that thought in our mind and we put it very nicely because that's the reality. You have to ask yourself, that's the reality. And notwithstanding the fact that, for example, in a meeting with multiple stakeholders, you would have representatives of parents there who would say the same thing that we are saying for you. And at the end of the day, thank you, goodbye, until the next meeting. And you don't see any significant effort being made to assist parents, for example, or to assist students in different sectors.
So what do we do? Because I think at the end of the day, I would assume that we are all concerned about our children, whether they be our children, our grandchildren, our cousins, whatever, that we are all concerned. I mean, what is their fate moving forward if this dance continues?
Fazil, listen, there is always a political dimension to these things, political not only in terms of party politics, but in terms of who has the greater influence over the ears of the persons in power. And so you have to be cognizant of that, and you have to reach out to all sectors. There are persons who are, or entities who will say, listen, the president of Ttuta, the Ttuta people is PNM, right? Because they want schools to open. Not having heard that Ttuta said, basically, let's get the thing right. Because at the end of the day, getting it right will benefit all of us. It will benefit all of us. It will benefit Trinidad and Tobago. So this is not about politics and who wants power and who's this and who's that. Because some of us, when we can't see our way, we turn to having problems with individuals. You take it at a personal level, you know, instead of looking at the bigger picture and the message. As a society, Fazil, we need to change our approach to dealing with our institutions. Dare I say, the debacle that occurred with the appointment of the police commissioner, some of us are talking about everything else except the process and the transparency in the process. Good? As a society, we have to move away from that insularity and look at the picture and look at how the institution helps our nation develop. And that goes for politicians to clean us down the road. And if we don't continue as educators trying to indoctrinate that kind of approach into our students, then we're going to have chaos down the road. And we see it as our responsibility then to continue trying, give the packages to the students, give the students money to come to school, make sure they have masks in the office, because make sure we have things to sanitize because they're not sanitizing properly. We will continue to do what we can.
Chaos down the road, we have it now, don't we, in many ways?
What world, some of us not living in that world, for you, apparently.
But anyway, the surprising thing in our discussion this morning is that you said that people calling you a PNM. I know people saying that you are UNC. The way you're always opposing.
Well, the reality is you can't please everybody. I wish I could find a party card to satisfy some people, but I don't have any.
I suppose it's a good thing that if you've been accused of being on both sides of the fence but
well, this is it, because then it means you're getting something done.
But are you actually getting anything? Do you feel, as a final point, we have about 60 seconds left, do you feel that you are achieving your purpose as president of Ttuta?
In highlighting the issues and getting the attention drawn, definitely. Take the bashing, take the bad talk and the mama guy, but at the end of the day, people recognize what's going on in education.
Antonia,
that's why I am vertically challenged and it goes over my head.
Antonia Tika-de-Freitas, we expect that the next time we interview you, you'll be wearing a red top with a yellow
bandana, yeah,
kind of thing, so that they can satisfy all of those political fanatics. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're more than welcome.
Safe, everyone.
Antonia Tika-de-Freitas, president of Ttuta. We might be making light of a lot of issues, but at the end of the day, what about the quality of governance? What about the quality of representation and advocacy and interest in the most vulnerable, beyond the political games, which we just seem so fascinated by? Respect the office. Here's an image captured in Williamsville, sent by Marsha Alicia Barrington. You would almost want to say angry grey clouds with a lot of rain. I wonder if it brought rain in that part of the country, Williamsville, as we go to the break and return with another discussion.